So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the World Cup Radar. My name is Adam Leventhal from The Athletic, and it is day 8. We're getting stuck into the action. As you saw there, we are all still thinking about Lionel Messi and that wonderful performance last night, that wonderful game just as an occasion against Mexico. But for it to include Lionel Messi scoring the most important goal, and such an impressive goal at that, and then capped off by Enzo Fernandez, the young gun in that Argentine side, to wrap up that 2-0 victory. It was a great moment for this World Cup. If Argentina had lost, obviously they would have been going home. We will also be reflecting on some of the other action from yesterday. We've had so much focus on Messi, so much focus on Cristiano Ronaldo, but Kylian Mbappe, he's just ticking along, isn't he? France victors over Denmark. Kylian Mbappe on target twice. We will be getting a reaction to that from one of our team of reporters who's just arrived here in Qatar, and she hit the ground running with 2 games in a day. Charlotte Harper is going to be joining us very, very shortly indeed. We'll get reaction to that Argentina-Mexico game with James Horncastle as well. We'll be checking in with David Ornstein too. He'll have the latest on England as well ahead of the game against Wales, the final group game in Group B. And we will be looking ahead to today's action as well at the World Cup. The games keep on coming thick and fast. It is another day of 4 games here in Qatar, starting off with Japan against Costa Rica. Obviously, Japan still on a high after their victory over Germany. The second game in that group is the last game, and it is the pick of the day's games, really, because it is Spain up against Germany, and Germany have to get a result to survive in this World Cup. And we'll be speaking to our German football writer, Rafa Ornstein, as well. That will be featured on the show. Remember the other games today, no small matter of Belgium up against Morocco. And then who would have thought that Croatia against Canada was going to be a grudge match? Well, Paul Herdman, the Canada manager, ensured that with some of his effing and jeffing after their defeat against Belgium. And the Croatian head coach has been hitting back. So it's a classic. We'll pin that on the dressing room wall moment for the Croatian team, and they will be going headlong into Canada today. So we will preview all of the action today. But let's first of all reflect then on the game last night at the Lusail Stadium. Great occasion. I was there when Mexico kicked off their tournament. Their fans were fantastic. We've seen Argentina's fans, although they were defeated against Saudi Arabia, fully invested in the tournament. Many Argentine fans in and around Doha staying and enjoying the tournament so far. But then the two sides collided at the Lusail Stadium, and it was Lionel Messi who took center stage. And luckily enough, James Horncastle was there for us. Let's get his take.
La Tercera, the 3rd World Cup in Argentina's history. It's still possible. The dream is alive. Even after that defeat to Saudi Arabia on matchday 1, Argentina put things right with a 2-0 win against Mexico. And once again, it was El 10, Lionel Messi, who we saw him score a penalty just a few days ago. He scored again today. And after all the speculation around him, is he fit? Does he have got a calf injury? Does he have an ankle injury? He ultimately still found a way, because he is Lionel Messi. And after 60 minutes of tension, you saw in his celebration just how unburdened, how relieved he was. And that had a transformational effect on Argentina. The players who came on in the second half, Enzo Fernandez, Julian Alvarez, they were able to play in a better environment, more freedom of expression. All of a sudden, the Argentine fans behind the goal where Messi scored, they were bouncing up and down, they were singing, and it feels like the mood has completely altered around Argentina now. Messi's been talking about the euphoria that he felt and the team is feeling. It's quite the contrast with what he said just a few days ago when he said that his teammates in the dressing room were muertos, they were dead. Well, Argentina are well and truly alive, and the tournament is better for it.
Yeah, so that was James Horncastle just after the game at the Lusail Stadium, that 2-0 victory for Argentina against Mexico. We'll be getting some more reaction from Felipe Cardenas as well, who was at the game. He'll be here in our rooftop position in Doha. In the background there, you can see over my, to the right of your screen is the 974 Stadium, which is one of the 8 venues which is being used here at the Qatar World Cup and the Bay Area here in Doha. We will be hearing from Felipe. I just wanted to break off for a moment because I know a lot of people in the UK will be tuning in, focusing obviously on the final game in Group B. It is England against Wales. And David Ornstein just checked in with us actually from the Lusail Stadium yesterday evening and just sent this little report on the latest from the England camp. Let's hear from David ahead of that game with Wales.
It's a crucial match for both teams. England are likely to go through, but they still need to see it over the line. A draw would make sure, but a win would guarantee them finishing top of the group. And there was a boost for England today when they returned to training for the first time since their 0-0 draw against the USA. It was only the players who didn't start out on the grass, but they were joined significantly for the first time since landing in Doha by James Maddison, who's been on the treatment table but took to the grass. He looked in high spirits, he was smiling, he was embracing his teammates. We were only shown 15 minutes of open training, as always, and from the images that emerged, it appeared that he was moving quite smoothly. So that really would give Gareth Southgate a lift in the creativity department. If he can maybe take a place on the bench against Wales, he definitely won't be starting, and perhaps have a role to play in this tournament after all.
So that was David speaking from the Lusail Stadium. And England do have training today, but it's actually a closed session. But we will be hearing from one of the England camp today. Then it will be tomorrow, which is Monday, match day -1. And we'll be hearing from Gareth Southgate ahead of the game with Wales. And also there'll be so much preview of that game on The Athletic, but also, as you would expect, of another huge game. It's almost a shootout, that final game, the other one in Group B between the USA and Iran. Maybe we'll touch upon that with Felipe, who's going to be joining us a little bit later on as well. And don't forget, I don't think I've even mentioned it yet. How rude of me that Caoimhe O'Neill and Michael Bailey will be picking out our latest radar player. And it has a link to the game this evening between Spain and Germany, which we're all looking forward to here in Doha. But as you can see, I have been joined by Charlotte Harper, who has arrived here in Doha. It's great to see you.
Lovely to see you too, Adam. You've made quite the trek up here, haven't you?
Yes, this is a rooftop position, which might look sort of tidy and neat, but the magic of television does hide quite a lot. We are very grateful to our hosts here in Doha who are going the extra mile to help us out with our equipment. Maybe I'll put some pictures on social media. So Charlotte, you arrived, 2 days ago? First day, straight into it, 2 games. First Tunisia against Australia. And then France against Denmark. Let's focus on the big one, which was France-Denmark. And Kylian Mbappe, he eventually came to fruition in the game, didn't he?
He did. He took the stage and took the game really by the scruff of its neck. I think France's chances actually were really polished and just needed that last touch to convert. But when it came to Mbappe and his goals, they were very scrappy. But I think that's credit to France as well, that they can keep producing, and the number of chances that they created. It was inevitable that they were going to score against Denmark and in the end take all 3 points.
And in terms of, I mentioned it a bit earlier on, that so much attention just on those big guns in and around Doha, on some of the buildings. You would have seen at the beginning of the intro there, that there are big images of the big players, including Harry Kane, Messi, Ronaldo, all sorts of big guns. There's been all this big focus on everyone, but maybe Kylian Mbappe has maybe just been getting on with his business, hasn't he? And not necessarily attracting or drawing the attention on himself.
Exactly. And that's what Didier Deschamps said, is that they've got a job to do. And, France have their own problems. We've seen this coming into the tournament off the pitch. On the pitch, the number of injuries, Benzema, Kante, Pogba, and Nkunku, Kimpembe, Hernandez. The list goes on. This is almost a second string French side, and yet they've performed. And we've seen Argentina struggle against Saudi Arabia in the first game. France have been clinical. And as Dom Fifield said in his article this morning, some of us are having to wipe egg off our faces and wait for that implosion, because as it stands, there's just no sign of that happening at the moment.
And Didier Deschamps, overall, he's had to deal with those issues that you mentioned, injury issues. How would you describe his sort of demeanour after the game?
In his press conference, he was quite prickly. There was a question from a French journalist about the curse on the reigning champions defending their title and getting out of the group stages. And he said, malédiction, like a curse. Like, this is just your narrative. This is the narrative that you want to depict, but we're having none of that in our camp. Again, a slight prickly moment when he was asked if he's going to make changes to the French lineup against Tunisia. And he said, who, what, when, why, how, I don't know. So it was really interesting to see his demeanour. But he was very, very pleased with his players. But, not getting ahead of themselves.
And the other game you saw yesterday was, I guess, the lesser lights, but not necessarily in terms of the Tunisia fans. They always sort of dominate, and it was a sea of red once again. But obviously didn't go to plan, and it was the Aussies that came up trumps and kept their hopes alive.
The Aussies loved it. What a win for them. Their third ever win in a World Cup. The first win in 12 years at a World Cup. So they were on cloud nine. And we're talking about Kylian Mbappe, Olivier Giroud, who really impressed against Australia. And, their winning man was Mitchell Duke. He's been completely underrated throughout his career. Age of 31, his first World Cup, and will most likely be his last. And he said to his son, when he made the squad, look, what do you want my goal celebration to be? And Jackson, his son, said the letter J. And he said, you have to have that confidence. You have to say to your son, what celebration do you want me to score, knowing that you will score? And I think either Mbappe or any top striker would be pretty impressed with that deft header, the technique that he got off the back of his head, the accuracy, the power. It was a really great moment for the Australians. And the Tunisian fans, I spoke to them before the game, and they said every time that Denmark went on the attack in their first game, they had their hearts in their mouths a bit, and that would have felt not quite the same because Australia didn't offer that offensive attack. And I think the Tunisian fans would have been really disappointed, but boy, could you hear them. Like the shriek every time Australia had the ball, followed by the cheer. They really followed the game. It was a great atmosphere.
It's interesting having a new reporter join us just slightly after we have originally arrived. We arrived a week ago. Charlotte arrived, as I mentioned, 2 days ago, or in the earlier. Was it this yesterday morning or two?
Friday evening.
It was Friday evening. Yeah. So to get your first impressions on landing here and being at this tournament from a different perspective, a new set of eyes. Just tell us how it's feeling for you.
It's hot. That feeling when you come off the aeroplane and it's just like a bubble of heat that just encapsulates around you. So everybody says it's hot, but it really is. Lots of FIFA staff everywhere you see, extremely friendly, extremely polite, but you see FIFA World Cup everywhere. And I say a shiny veneer. I've just spoken about the world's best players on show, and it is great to see them in the flesh. But let's not forget the controversies around this World Cup. And I strongly encourage everybody to read Adam Crafton's piece this morning on watching the World Cup on a live screen with the migrant workers, a 25-minute drive outside of the city of Doha named Labour City. And we mustn't forget that. I know that I've spoken to people who were prevented from wearing shirts, Women, Life, Freedom, in regards to the Iranian protests. We'll have more on that to come in the following days. So a real juxtaposition that you have to hold in both hands. And our editor-in-chief, Alex Kojelski, spoke on the Athletic Football podcast of we have to keep talking about it. And it's that squidgy feeling of how do you feel about the World Cup? On the one hand, I've just witnessed Kylian Mbappe. What a privilege. On the other hand, we still have these controversies with LGBTQ plus with migrant workers, with women, and we have to keep talking about those issues to hold them both juxtaposed.
Charlotte, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of that article from Adam Croft, and it's out on The Athletic right now. We also touch on some of the other issues, broader issues being covered at this World Cup. Actually, between one former manager and one current manager, Carlos Queiroz of Iran, who Charlotte mentioned, it obviously has an impact in its very difficult political situation in Iran at the moment. But Carlos Queiroz was reacting to Jurgen Klinsmann's, he felt, generalizations about Iran and the way that they play, which maybe went into the realms of questioning their integrity and questioning ultimately the entire Iranian race. And he has hit back on social media. We cover that on the Athletic Football Podcast. So tune in to that one in all your usual podcast places. Charlotte is on that. Felipe, who's going to be joining us live as well, is also on that as well. But now it's time on the World Cup radar to focus on our latest radar pick. It is a huge piece of work from the Athletic, 100 players at this World Cup tournament, and Michael Bailey and Caoimhe O'Neill can select our latest candidate. Over to you guys.
Hello and welcome to the Athletics World Cup Radar. My name's Caoimhe O'Neill.
And I'm Michael Bailey.
And we have got a player for you today who is Spanish, plays for Barcelona. I think you might be able to see him on the screen behind me. He is, of course, Gavi, 18-year-old, prodigious talent, just incredible midfielder. Who doesn't love a Barcelona midfielder, let alone a Spanish midfielder as well? He's just a phenomenal young player, one of the best at this World Cup. I think there's 18 teenagers that are right at this World Cup, and he's one that you definitely have to keep on your radar.
I'm going to vouch your knowledge on the number of teenagers, but I love Gavi. I've loved watching him play for Barcelona. It doesn't feel like he's been around for very long, does it? I think, was it 2020 he made his debut?
Yeah, Ronald Koeman brought him into the Barcelona team at 16, I think.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And
then his Spanish debut came after only 270 more minutes.
Luis Enrique obviously and just needed that much time to say, yep, this is the kid, this is the one. I think he's a bit of a star in our eyes, isn't he, for all of us, and definitely that comes across with Ronald Koeman quickly wanting to play for Barcelona, and then, as you say, 275 minutes. That's not really a lot of time to see a player. Obviously, he must have progressed as well through the youth ranks at Spain, and then he's become Spain's youngest goal scorer. He's got plenty of incredible records. There's one that sticks out, which is, I think, the youngest player to play in El Clasico, obviously the game Barcelona versus Real Madrid. The youngest player since 1941 to feature in that game.
Wow.
That, when you think of Barcelona and Real Madrid and all the incredible young talents they've had, he is the youngest player that has been trusted to play in that massive, the world's biggest game, club game, and he's been trusted with that. That's why ever since he's made his debut for Spain, he's played every single game, and you're likely to see him play every single game at this World Cup so far.
I think the thing that gets me about Gavi is he is archetypally a brilliant Spanish talent, and you can see how good he is on the ball, and we'll have a look at some of those bits in a bit as well. But he works so hard. He's actually a really great defensive player in terms of getting back, covering, working hard, and he's really quite aggressive as well. There's been quite a few yellow cards. I know he's sort of known for picking up a yellow card here and there.
Yeah, on the radar, if you read it on The Athletic, which is obviously what we're talking about today, we've profiled 100 players, and Gavi is one of them. Dermot Corrigan, our Spanish reporter, La Liga reporter, he wrote his first El Clasico, which is what I referred to before. He sort of got into a bit of argy-bargy with Toni Kroos, just Real Madrid's legendary midfielder, and he's just battling away, this teenager, just, not scared, fearless almost. And I feel like that, is obviously a massive asset for him. He just doesn't seem to be fazed by any occasion at all. So you can see why he is such one of the youngest players to play for Spain and for Barcelona as well.
But I think why there's so much high hopes as well for what he can do in his career, even already now at such a young age. You can obviously check out the radar at theathletic.co.uk or theathletic.com. I think they both work wherever you are in the world, to give them both a go, and you'll be able to check the full list of all the players there on our World Cup radar. Should we have a look at a pizza chart?
Yeah, go on.
Let's have a
We
look at a
haven't
pizza
looked
chart.
at a pizza chart in a while.
It's been at least 24 hours
Yeah.
for most people. We can have a look at Gavi's pizza chart here. I think the thing that sticks out for me, well, it probably sticks out for everyone, but again, those red slices kind of underline what I was saying about how good he is out of possession and just the way he covers the ground, but also engages in those tackling. I mean, these aren't numbers for a comparative player at his age. These are numbers for a comparative player at that level of any age. And we talk about players being good enough if they're old and good enough. What is the saying?
Something about that.
If you're good enough, you're old enough.
That's the one.
He's both. He's old enough and good enough and just exceptional. And then we also have the green areas, which is more about his use of the ball. I think maybe what we would expect in terms of his high quality ball retention and link up play. But it's really standout how good he is at receiving the ball in the opposition penalty area, which for me tells me how good he is at making intelligent runs and being free in those spaces to pick up the ball, but also then create opportunities for others from those moments as well, which is a fantastic talent, a fantastic aspect to see and ability. I think something we did see quite a lot of against Costa Rica, as bad as Costa Rica were in that game.
His finish in that game was just sumptuous. The technique to just sort of let it come across, and yeah, I mean that was a phenomenal finish. And this is a player very much forged at La Masia, obviously Barcelona's academy, but also not at the same time, because he's born in Andalusia. He comes from Real Betis' academy originally. Barcelona found him at age 11 and was like, let's get him in. And obviously did, and I think it was 5 years later he's making his debut for Barcelona or something ridiculous like that. That was only 7 years ago. When you think he's 18, he joined Barcelona 7 years ago, and we're already talking about him so much. And he is definitely a standout player. I mentioned that goal, which was just gorgeous, one of my favourites of the World Cup so far. But his play across the midfield and getting forward, as you've mentioned, those short, sharp, incisive passes, they just feel very Barcelona, very Spain midfield, and it is just beautiful to watch, especially alongside Pedri, his Barcelona teammate as well.
We'll have to do him on another day, Pedri.
Absolutely.
I hope there's some footage of Gavi around as 11-year-old. I'd like to watch and see just how much he stood out as an 11-year-old. I reckon that'd be awesome to watch.
Yeah, definitely. There must be, because it wasn't that long ago, which scares me terribly.
Was there a graphic you wanted to look at as well?
Oh yeah, there was a great. Just mentioned obviously his passing as well, and there's a graphic that we can pull up here, which is progressive passes, and this is looking at La Liga this season, and I mean this is pretty special. He's top of the shop there, ahead of players like David Silva and obviously Caoimhe of Real Madrid. Rakitic is in there, Pedri, we've just mentioned, Luka Modric, all these amazing players, midfielders, a lot of them, and the progressive passes are basically, you can see there, the passes received more, so the ball 10 yards closer to goal, basically, so he's, a pass that's 10 yards or longer and gets you a little bit closer to the goal, basically, if I've explained that correctly, or any pass received in the penalty area, which we've referred to, he likes to get in there, which I think's, a great asset for a young player. Just that, I think it's that vision as well. He's got that glancing, that looking around, sort of scanning
the pitch, exactly.
Just knowing where everything is, and he's got a vision that not a lot of players have or can get. It just sort of, it's just in him, and that's great to see. So, to be ahead of those players and be making 5.6 progressive passes is, that I think that alone sort of speaks for the kind of player and what he does on the pitch.
It's really interesting because Barcelona have had a slightly ropey time recently, and
you've had a tough season.
Season, exactly. And there's a lot going on.
Tough few seasons, to be fair.
Yeah, lots of levers. He's had a tough time with it, but Barcelona have. But I think Gavi, it says how talented he is, that they are, trusting him and almost to a degree relying on him despite his tender years to really show up. I think he'll be at that club for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a €1 billion release clause.
That would do
it. I mean, you're going to have to put some money down. To clubs would cost less. A lot of football clubs will cost less to get Gavi. So yeah, played 47 games last season and will play plenty more. You're talking hundreds of games, you'd imagine, considering how young he started out. But yeah, that is Gavi.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, that's Caoimhe O'Neill and Michael Bailey with our latest radar pick. And it was Gavi who was on target in that 7-0 victory against Costa Rica. It was a game that I was at. And Spain, early on, looked as if they were going to be a little bit wasteful. You're getting a little bit worried. And then, whoa, the floodgates opened and they ran in those 7 goals and looked very, very impressive indeed. I actually bumped into one of my former colleagues at Sky Sports. You'll be familiar with him. Guillem Balaguer is a Spanish football expert, and he was telling me that there's almost a feel now within this Spanish side that they're like a club side almost under Luis Enrique, and they've got a great togetherness. They've got a nice balance between youth and experience, and I think they're quite fancying their chances in this World Cup because not that many people are talking about them, but after that first game, it's difficult not to think, well, hang on a minute, they might be capable of something. But to be brutally honest about Costa Rica, I'm not sure how much of a benchmark they are going to be for anyone to rank themselves against in this tournament because they weren't particularly impressive at all, however much Spain did do well. Let's briefly pop back if we can, because we'll be speaking about Spain against Germany in a moment's time, to Michael Bailey, who's in our studio in London. Michael, hello. Great work on the radar. Hi there. I just wanted to just sort of ask you a general question, because obviously we're here in Qatar, in the heat, you know, in the hubbub of the tournament, surrounded by FIFA branding, and it's all very shiny, as Charlotte was saying, and, you know, it all looks great on the surface. Back in England, what's the feeling over there? Is it capturing the imagination? Because it's, let's not forget, this is very odd. We feel like we're at a Summer World Cup, but it's not a Summer World Cup. It's in the middle of winter, and you're in a completely different climate at the moment. So how's it feeling for you?
Yeah, I suppose there's a first caveat is I feel like I've been in a bit of an athletic bubble the last few days. So it's sometimes hard to know exactly what's going on outside of the studio and the sports desk and what we're doing here. I think, I mean, certainly for me, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's incredibly intense. The level of games we're obviously seeing every day is something unprecedented. And there's almost too much football to process everything. It feels like it's going at a whirlwind pace, as was the build-up, of course, because we literally had a football season and then a week, and then it was the World Cup. So I think just in general perception of what I have seen outside, it feels like it's sort of simmering. I think maybe once and if England progress and get further in it, it will start to capture more people's imagination. But I think because it's happened so intensely so far, I think people are just sort of knowing it's there and taking it in. But maybe that whole intensity and momentum of feeling around it isn't quite there here yet. Obviously, on top of that, we've got all the caveats. There are a lot of people who don't want to watch this World Cup out of principle and don't want to be engaged with it. So how that plays out over the coming weeks will be very interesting. But I think everyone knows it's happening. They're maybe just waiting to get fully involved.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting point. And prior to leaving, my thought on how it was going to be at home, and I wanted to get your take on this, is it's going to be quite fun because there's going to be lots of games on. You're going to be cozy. You're going to be at home. Are you getting that feeling? How is it watching a World Cup in the winter?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at what I would say is actually feels relatively mild here. We're not quite in, you know, it's chucking it down every day. It's -2 and everyone wants to be by a fire. We're not quite at that level yet, which is welcome. So I think there probably is a freedom that, you know, people are able to go out. We can still see the crowds at Box Park and things like that. There are still people who are fully taking weeks off so they can watch all of the football because there is so much football taking place. So I think obviously it's a bit more indoors, a fewer T-shirts, and if you throw your beer in the air, it's going to cover the walls rather than just the air. But I think I think people are generally quite resourceful, and I think if the environment is slightly different, it gets adjusted to. I think most people probably do enjoy it more so in the summer when there's a bright and breezy feeling in the air.
And you mentioned in your first answer there that, you know, people aren't really wanting to engage in the tournament. Have you had any sort of first-hand experience of, you know, your friends or your family or colleagues or whatever it is actually going, no, I'm sort of conscientiously objecting to engaging in this tournament? Or is it very much it is starting to just sort of dominate and it's unavoidable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I know friends who from the outset, and journalist colleagues who were like, you know what, I'm not engaging with this. I do not want to be a part of it. And I think maybe the more politically engaged people, any individual is, the more that stance is probably easier for them to take, especially if they don't really like football as well. We've seen commentators who, you know, if they don't like football, it's really just a thing that is unnecessary and everything is completely unsavory about it. I think there are then a lot of people who are hugely conflicted, and I thought Charlotte was brilliant when she was speaking earlier, and I share that as well. You know, I'm a huge football fan. I've been covering football for 15 years, and I feel like everything I do has to come with a caveat of yeah, but this. And I think the difficult thing is FIFA putting every football fan in that position. Some will be fine with it, and it's okay to separate the issues, but I think a lot of people with a conscience will feel really conflicted that the joy of the World Cup has to come with that caveat. And it's very difficult because the more it happens, the more we see Brazil look as good as they did, France just looking like such a complete outfit, Mbappe looking like the world-class elite player playing at the very top of his game in a major tournament. That's really exciting. Lionel Messi's celebration last night was just fantastic. You're like, oh, this is why we love football. And then something just twigs in the back of your brain. You're like, oh, yeah, but, and you can't stop talking about it. We can't stop talking about it. And I think fans can't stop thinking about it. And I don't think that feeling is going to go away. If anything, it might get worse and harder to deal with the longer we get into the tournament.
Michael, thank you very much indeed, not only for your sterling work with Caoimhe earlier on with the radar pick, but just giving us a taste of what it's like back in England. Obviously, you know, people from all around the world are watching this, and we will be touching base with various people in various territories. But Michael, thank you very much indeed for now. Just kicking on from what Michael said there, cheerio, in terms of having that moment in your mind where you think, yes, I'm watching the football, whether you're at home or whether you're here, and then thinking about some of the horrendous situations that occurred here in Doha, in particular, that were faced by the migrant workers who were working, building in even more searing heat than it is now, almost unbearable heat in the summer here in Doha, in building these stadiums, including the stadium that is behind me right now, the 974 stadium, which, although it has this sustainability tagline, it is known that people did suffer in building that stadium, which is going to be the first, as FIFA trumpeted, the first stadium which is actually going to be able to be deconstructed fully and then packed away. The reason for the name, if you haven't caught it already on one of our shows previously, it's the 974 stadium. That's not only the Doha dialing code or the Qatar dialing code, but it is also the number of shipping containers that make up the external elevation of the stadium. And they will then be repurposed because we are in a shipping area. We're by the water, of course, and I was down here a little bit. It was yesterday evening, actually. I was just having a walk around, and I wanted to just focus on one of the pieces that is out on The Athletic this morning, and it concerns those migrant workers because it is a rather strange situation that so many people here who contributed so much to building the stadiums, not only were their lives lost, but now those that have done so much hard work are almost being kept at arm's length. Some are continuing to do work, of course, but they are literally being kept at arm's length, around about half an hour away. I'll just pause for a moment as a helicopter flies over just above me there. And Adam Crafton made the trip to what is known as the industrial fan zone, which is surrounded by living quarters as well for some of the migrant workers that have worked on FIFA projects. And I just wanted to give you a little taste as to what it's like there. These are some of the pictures that Adam shot yesterday. Let's just bring you those. Just have a look.
Come on. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. You have to come from this side. Okay. You can't go from there. Okay, take chair here. Take chair here. Okay. He was out fast also. Yes. I didn't see that. That is why I made a bit of that. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, so that looks like quite a fun experience for those migrant workers who have access to those football pitches and things like that. But it is very, very worth reading the piece from Adam Crafton, which just gives you the human stories behind the maybe the FIFA facade of that situation. And as I was walking around yesterday, relatively near to where the hotel is, I was watching some of the action with some locals who live in the local area, and they were explaining to me how so many of the migrant workers live in a big, large area, sort of a labour city almost, which is made up of various different sort of encampments. And initially, there was an aim to maybe allow locals here in Qatar to get access to the tournament, to be able to go and see games, but that is not proving the case at all. The initial round of tickets that were given out were snapped up by those who could probably afford the prices that are now available to people, which is around about 800 riyals. Initially, they were being put out at around about 40 riyals, which is £10. But it does have, and this is touching on the point there that Michael was making, that there is always two sides to the story at this Qatar World Cup. And although it is a global event, it doesn't necessarily feel at all times like it has really been able to be connected to the locality here in Qatar. Now, we're hoping to speak to Rafa Ornstein, who is going to be focusing for us on the Germany against Spain game a little bit later on today. But let's just take you through the fixtures that will precede those two going head-to-head a little bit later on between Spain and Germany. Japan, of course, they are the first game. That kicks off at 1 o'clock local time. So that's 10 o'clock in the UK. That's about as many time zones as I can process myself. So if you're watching this elsewhere in the world, just check on your phone. I'm sure it will tell you exactly what time it is. The next game after Japan against Costa Rica, Japan can wrap up their qualification, consecutive qualifications at World Cups, is Belgium against Morocco. And you remember the narrative after the first game between Belgium and Canada was that Belgium, yeah, they won. They won 1-0. It was Michy Batshuayi who scored the goal for them, but they weren't particularly impressive, and they just snuck past Canada. And Paul Herdman, the Canadian manager, very vociferous individual. He's from the UK. He's cut his teeth in women's football with both New Zealand and then Canada, built a very strong structure in the women's game, and then moved over to the English game. He is really now gunning for Croatia, and he was very vocal in his determination. I can't say the word, I really wish I could, but I can't. It begins with F, ends with K, has a couple of letters in the middle, and this was the aim to really get stuck into Croatia in this next game. And the Croatian camp have reacted, and they've felt that was slightly disrespectful. Let's not forget that Croatia got to the final in 2018. They lost out to Kylian Mbappe's France, and they feel that it was a bit disrespectful. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens after the Belgium-Morocco game between Croatia and Canada. And then we have the game between Spain and Germany. And if you haven't kept track with exactly what's been happening in the Spain and Germany group, which is Group E, Spain obviously are top. They won that opening game against Costa Rica 7-0, as we were talking earlier on. Gavi scoring one of the goals, who was the focus of our radar section there. And then Japan are second. They beat Germany. There were some great scenes actually from the Japanese press corps when they'd covered the game against Germany. They'd beaten Germany in that shock result. They were actually welcomed back into the media center, which is just on the outskirts of Doha here, with a round of applause. And they were singing on their way up the escalators. And I think it was a very popular result, obviously not for the Germans, but for Japan to pull off that great result. was one of the highlights so far of the tournament. One of the shocks, really, wasn't it? Alongside Saudi Arabia beating Argentina. But I wonder if we'll get any more shocks today. So it's Spain top with 3, Japan then in second with 3, and then obviously Germany and Costa Rica. It is their second game. They are both on 0 points. So depending on what happens with Japan and Costa Rica today, it may well be obviously that Germany need to win to have any chance of qualifying. It may well be that if Japan beat Costa Rica, then they will obviously have to win. But it is sort of winner takes all now for Germany. Now, we are hoping to hear from Rafa Honigstein. Felipe Cardenas is going to be joining us as well. And just a quick reminder on what we have from England today. They are going to be holding a training session, which is behind closed doors. And then we are going to be hearing from one of the England team as well, just to gauge how they're feeling ahead of that final game of the group against Wales. And we'll also have much more coverage of the England camp on The Athletic, but also the USA from our US writers as well. Felipe Cardenas is going to be joining us very, very shortly indeed. Let's just check in with a little bit more reaction from last night, and just to tee up, I think, a couple of our final guests on this World Cup radar.
Felipe Cardenas here with The Athletic. I'm outside Lusail Stadium. Argentina has defeated Mexico 2-0 with some messy magic in the 64th minute, and then an Enzo Fernandez wonder strike to make it 2-0 and just really crush Mexico. I think this is going to essentially knock them out. They need a miracle. They need a mathematical miracle now. They need to beat Saudi Arabia by at least 3 goals and then hope that Argentina does the same against Poland. So tough going for Mexico, a bit negative in their formation and their game plan, but that was part of the plan. You know, in speaking to some players from Argentina, Rodrigo de Paul, Leo Messi went to the mix zone. We got to hear him as well, and they were surprised by the way Mexico came out and really didn't attack. They knew that the tie was okay for them. A draw was fine for Mexico. And that was the first 45 minutes that we saw. A bit of a slugfest. Mexico really winning more duels, more tackles, frustrating Argentina until the second half when it opened up, and honestly Mexico just ran out of gas. And then when you do that, Leo Messi is going to figure it out, and that's what he did. So Argentina are back, we think. They're very confident again. That was the mood in the mix zone. There's videos of them dancing in the locker room as well. So the contenders are back in business.
Indeed they are. So that was Felipe Cardenas last night, and this is him this morning. Hello, Felipe.
Hello, Adam. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you? Because it was a late night, right?
It was a very late night. Got back to the hotel around 4 a.m. And I blame the Argentines. They were celebrating in the dressing room as if they had really not. Again, I don't want to say like they won the World Cup, but that's what they do. I think when this team wins, that's what they remember. Remember, they came into the tournament on a 36-game winning streak. Losing to Saudi Arabia was a big, big shock. Lionel Messi in the mix zone yesterday spoke about that, about the last few days have been very difficult on this team. They were together, but the vibe around the team was different. The energy was different. It was tense. It was anxious. And so this win over Mexico, I think, really just brought back the energy that this Argentine team came into the tournament carrying. I think now, like I mentioned last night, this is a very confident team. And I expect them to play just as well in the second half that they did in Mexico in the entire game against Poland in the final group stage match.
Is that an issue, though, with Argentina, that obviously we love the emotion. We love seeing that scene with Messi scoring, with Enzo Fernandez scoring, the connection with the fans, the close-ups of the fans, you know, their biceps rippling with how much, you know, energy they're putting into their celebrations. But is it possible that you can be too hot and cold? You can invest too much emotionally?
I think just culturally, the Argentines don't find balance. You know, that's why the sport is like a religion there. And it's a good point that you bring up, though. You know, they were punched in the mouth against Saudi Arabia. They took a punch. They took a few punches. They hit the mat. And that was the talk leading up to this match against Mexico. Can they get up off the mat. And Lionel Scaloni, the manager, brought up the analogy several times in the press conference before that match, like, we are Argentina, we know how to get up. We will be ready for this game. You know, a lot of the cliches about we never give up and we will fight. And so, but again, I think that's how this team just gets on. You know, and I think that's the culture of the team. You can see it from the fans. You can see it from even the pundits and the journalists that are here. They were so used to seeing this team excel that there was a lot of anxiety heading into the match against Mexico. But I had a feeling, honestly, that I just couldn't picture this team with Lionel Messi and all the stars that they have and the young players off the bench. You mentioned Enzo Fernandez. I couldn't imagine them having 2 flat games. And they were frustrated in the first half by Mexico's approach, defensive approach. But in the end, they you know, the fatigue from the Mexicans just opened up that game. It gave Lionel Messi that yard of space that he needed, and he really just decided the game in that moment.
And just a word on Mexico. I mean, obviously, haven't scored yet, and just didn't look likely to score. And, you know, obviously from an English perspective, a lot of Wolves fans, I guess, are watching, you know, seeing Raul Jimenez struggling once again. And I think there's obviously bigger issues there for him, understandably. Where do you look? Where are the goals going to come from? It just doesn't seem to be clicking at all. And, you know, there's pressure on them right now.
There's a lot of pressure. And the fact that mathematically they're still alive, but they need to score multiple goals against Saudi Arabia, it seems unlikely. But again, this World Cup has already shown a lot of surprises. So I think that's the hope that they have. The players after the match, the Mexican players were saying, if there's just a slimmer of hope, we're going to go for it. But again, they were really pounded with questions about the lack of just being a dangerous team, a goal threat, no goal threat. Where is the problem coming from? Several of the players said that they just don't know. And I do agree that it's a difficult question to answer for a player immediately after a match, but they did emphasize that, like, we work on this. We work on finishing during the week. It's like a very focused part of our training. I just feel like overall, over the last year or so, they've struggled to just find that number 9. You mentioned Raul Jimenez. It's now, you know, public. You could hear it from the manager. You could hear it from his teammates that the injury he suffered changed him. You know, and he is an inspiration to the team, but he is a different player as well. I don't know where the goals are going to come. I think they've depended too much on just the direct play of like a Irving Lozano. That's what they did last night. They wanted to get in behind the Argentine defense and just, you know, trouble them with speed. That just isn't enough to produce goals. And that's going to be the story of this World Cup if they're out after the 3rd game.
A couple of questions I wanted to ask you about. Spain, you've been keeping a close eye on for the Athletic. You're spinning a lot of plates right now. Fair play. Big game tonight against Germany. I mentioned there a little bit earlier on, I bumped into Guillaume Balaguer, who's, you know, a Spanish journalist for years and years and years, has been covering them closely. And he was almost saying that they feel like they're a club side almost. Yeah. They're really together. Is that the vibe that you're getting as well?
Yes, and also tactically, you know, after the 7-0 thrashing against Costa Rica, their teenager, I believe, Lassine Balde from Barcelona, he was asked, is there any difference between playing with Barcelona and playing with Spain? He said no. He just like flat out said no. There's really no difference between the two sides. And again, of course, that has a lot to do with the players there. You know, Luis Enrique can essentially start the Barcelona midfield for Spain. He is a former Barcelona player. He is a former Barcelona coach. He understands that identity. And I think you can see when I saw them in person, you were with me. Like they were just flowing. It did not look like a side that just got together the last week before the tournament and they were flying in and at the last minute. They do look like a team that's been together for a very long time. And so that's the danger that they present to a team like Germany that's against the ropes now. And again, we saw it in person. Spain, they are pass masters. They are very cool and casual on the ball, but they can put you to sleep. They can make you run around. It'll be a lot more difficult with an energetic German side, but I do think the advantage of just everyone understanding exactly how they need to play, Spain does have an advantage there. And we mentioned it before. We're talking about Asensio, Pedri, Gavi, even Busquets. Looks like the old Busquets. Will he be in this match against Germany? That'll be a much faster game. We'll have to see. But I like Spain in this game again. I think they can manage this result.
We shall see what happens. Felipe, what I'm going to ask you to do is exit stage right very, very carefully. And you can do this live on television. And I'm going to watch you down very carefully. There you go. Magic. Felipe, top work as always. He is off to write in the hotel that we are based on right now. Felipe, thank you so much. We will have much more from Felipe throughout this tournament on The Athletic. Right, so he was able there to give us a Spanish perspective. Let's get the German take. Rafa Ornstein is here with us. Now, when I saw you the day after the Japan game, you were cutting quite a disconsolate figure. Are you now full of vim and vigor and fight, raring to go ahead of this big game? And more importantly, I suppose you're not going out on the pitch. Are the German team?
I hope that they have more confidence than me, let's put it this way, because I'm still feeling very negative. I'm very anxious about what might happen today. Germany might join Qatar as the only other nation already eliminated after two games, which would really reflect pretty badly on this Germany team. And I'm hoping that they can somehow find enough ways of looking this game with some degree of courage and positivity, because I didn't feel it immediately, let's say, among the other journalists after the defeat. I think a lot of us expect Germany maybe to put up a decent fight, but maybe not quite have enough to beat Spain. So, yeah, it wouldn't be a huge surprise if they fail, unfortunately.
You spoke about and it was interesting, the contrast between how Argentina players dealt with their shock defeat against Saudi Arabia, and then how the Germans dealt with their shock defeat. They were very vocal. They were explaining the issues and things like that. Now there's been a couple of days to process it, for them to maybe get the messaging of the manager, to maybe regroup. What has been said that maybe suggests that they've got a hold of this in any way, that they've maybe regrouped in the way that they need to?
Well, they were talking, and took us into that meeting that they had where they discussed the game, what went wrong. There was an exchange of opinions. Everyone chipped in. The management team also, I think, looked at their own possible mistakes by maybe taking off the wrong players, Nilka Gundogan and Jamal Musiala. I asked Hansi Flick about this yesterday at the press conference. He said, well, Musiala was indicating that he wanted to come off. So he, I think, acknowledged that the impact was a negative one, a net negative one. But Flick has a problem because Flick wanted to keep everyone happy. And Leon Goretzka is a very vocal midfielder who feels that he should be starting. And I think the idea was to just give him enough game time to keep him happy. The problem was he put him on at the very moment that the game was slipping away from Germany and they lost the rhythm. And I wonder if he would make that same mistake again, especially with the game against Japan having been put to bed at that point. I don't get the sense that this is a team necessarily at each other's throat, that there are big splits, that there are big problems in the dressing room, that there's no backing for Flick anymore. But the game against Japan and the result has put so much pressure on this team that we will see how they'll deal with it, because this is the kind of situation that you either emerge from and go stronger from as a side that comes together and with one or two players perhaps really stepping up and doing something special like Messi did last night, or they will wilt under the pressure. And that's why another reason why this game couldn't be bigger tonight.
And just one more question to you, Raf, because I know you're busy. It feels like a sort of a sink or swim moment, doesn't it? Almost like a turning point moment for Germany, potentially. We will see. Tactically, we've got Felipe's take there, and there's a lot to read about Spain's tactical approach and their comfort in playing. They feel like they're a club side, as we mentioned a couple of times already. Where is this game going to potentially have any sort of tiny chinks of light for Germany to exploit in this Spanish side?
Well, I think that the little bit of confidence comes from the fact that Bayern beat a Barcelona side that isn't too dissimilar twice in the Champions League not long ago, with very similar personnel. You'll see 6 or 7 Bayern players in the starting lineup. So there's a degree of knowing how to play against a side like that who want the ball. I think the idea is if you take the ball away from them, they're only half as good. They don't deal with it very well, and they can be defensively suspect. But you still need to execute your own game plan a lot better than they did. So I don't think it's so much about what Spain will do. It's about getting Germany's game right. And they have their own issues, especially in the fullback situations, where they have to find better ideas, better application. And then they'll hope that Spain will perhaps find it hard to deal with extended German possession. I think that's going to be the idea. Hansi Flick seemed to downplay suggestions that they might change the system or introduce a third midfielder. I think it would be surprised, because it'd be almost an admission that there's something wrong with the basic setup, and I don't think he wants to send that message.
Rafa, really appreciate your time. Enjoy, if you can, tonight. Take care, all the best, and hopefully we'll catch up with you in the aftermath, potentially a successful aftermath for Germany. We shall see. Thank you very much indeed. So that's Rafa Ornstein speaking to us just from elsewhere here in Doha. So we are all ready now for day 8 of the World Cup. This has been the World Cup radar. Just to mark your card today, it's a Sunday. You don't need to go to work, potentially. You can sit and watch all of the games. Japan against Costa Rica from 1 o'clock local time, 10 back in the UK. Then you've got Belgium against Morocco, 4 o'clock here. That's 1 o'clock back in the UK. And I know I'm forgetting other time zones, but I've explained that I can't do the maths. Then we have Croatia against Canada. It's a game I'm really, really looking forward to. I'm going to try and head down to that one. And then Spain against Germany kicks off 10 o'clock local time. That is 7 o'clock, simple maths, back at home. And you'll remember that obviously Germany are now trying to react to their shock victory. Argentina, their shock defeat, I should say, against Japan. Argentina should be their inspiration. They were shocked, obviously, against Saudi Arabia, but they came back with a bang last night against Mexico. And we'll leave you with images of their celebration. And we will see you tomorrow. And don't forget, head on to theathletic.com, pick up our best deal of the year at the moment. You can pick up a subscription for just £1 for the next 12 months. And you can join all the reading here on The Athletic. And we'll continue with our audio offerings, video offerings right here as well. But there is so much being covered from the World Cup here in Doha for you. Let's leave you with the Argentine celebrating that Messi-inspired victory. Take care until tomorrow.